Hello.
Hello, everybody. Pleasant good afternoon to all of you. We are very excited that you have joined us for the final in this three-part series, the Mindful Care Collective. I am so excited to introduce our speaker, and in fact, reintroduce that is Alexaraye. Just as a courtesy, if you can ensure while you are engaging with Alexa that you are mindful of, background noises and all that good stuff. But we're excited to have fun today to learn from her. So without further ado, Alexa, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. I super appreciate you. And it's very nice to meet you both. Ruka, thank you so much. And Aline, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. And for everybody else in the room, there'll be some participation today. And of course, you're welcome to pass. You don't have to participate. And I know for some of us, I'm always in my virtual, hello, Ruka. I like the little hand. I see that. For some of us, we're in our messy buns. Like I always talk about in my virtual classes with our nannies when we meet up. So I understand if you don't want to show your face, but if you want to participate with your voice, you're welcome to. So I'll always pause a little bit. But to get started, I should probably introduce myself a little bit and talk about who I am and kind of what is bringing me to this space. And so, can everybody hear me? And if Aline, we're good to go, you can hear me. Ruka, awesome, wonderful. Thank you so much.
I can hear you. We can hear you. It's all good. Thank
Yay,
you.
lovely. Okay, thank you. And thank you again to the International Nanny Association for creating a series that supports nannies, especially during this unprecedented time in history. And thank you to everyone that is joining us today for the last virtual class of our Mindful Nanny sessions. I really hope that you've been inspired to learn more about embodying a mindfulness practice and see how it can help improve both your personal and your professional lives as nannies and caregivers. I have certainly learned a lot from all of you, and I truly appreciate the feedback that I've been receiving from many of you. So thank you again. I'm so happy to be here with each and every one of you today. So a quick note about today's session. We have a lot to cover today, and I did my best to condense everything to fit it into our short time together. So we will, as we began on time, we will end on time today. So if there's anything that we cover that you would like to learn about, please feel free to reach out to me personally. You can reach me best on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook a lot. I'm just, I don't know, it's not really my jam, but Instagram is. And so that's the Mindful Nanny Collective and the Mindful Care Collective. You can also check out my website, and I've got some options there, themindfulcarecollective.com. And you can sign up for my intensive mindful nanny training courses that I'll be releasing this fall. So we're going to be exploring and discussing all of these topics and tools in much greater detail. So for those of you tuning in today who weren't here for our last two sessions, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am. So I've been caring for children for over 20 years. I have also practiced as a labor, birth, and postpartum doula. I've worked with amazing unicorn families, nannied across the world. I've been asked to come back or move back with families. And like any good career nanny, I've also had some not so great employers. So recognizing my part in the partnership, a personal lack of boundaries, and a lack of embodied self-care practice that really led to the infamous nanny burnout. I sought after how I could change. What was my part in the responsibility? How could I show up differently? Recognizing that growing in a career where we help others grow, we must also embody that interpersonal growth as well. So I believe it's imperative that we always seek out the best science and community that support the growing minds and bodies of all children, no matter your ethnicity, your background, or religious faith. And we all make up that bright future that we so desperately need right now, right? So I've been studying adult mindfulness for years. As a child, I practiced it without even knowing that there was a word for it. It was a coping mechanism for me, really. I grew up in a low income single mother household for the first 5 years of my life, and our family's social and emotional needs were always on the back burner to putting food on the table and keeping a roof over our heads. And I literally knew at age 5, lying in bed one morning after watching and observing for years interactions between my mother and grandmother, that I didn't want that type of relationship that they had. I didn't want to perpetuate the negativity, the neglect, and the emotional thoughtlessness that permeated throughout my entire family. So, because of this, amongst many other reasons, I grew up observing and reflecting, tuning into the world outside, and knowing that it was my responsibility to change my family's legacy, something I've really taken very seriously. And I've been incredibly blessed by the families that I've worked with for over 20 years because they have taught me proper social and emotional skills. They've taught me how families interact and love one another. And in between that space, I implemented different ideas and thought processes. Again, it was my responsibility to grow within these family dynamics. So I started to kind of notice when I was little how tuning into the world really helped. Noticing the trees, the flowers, the sky, and the clouds. It provided me with a feeling of safety when things got loud or fearful at home. I practiced mindfulness in order to cope with the toxic climate that surrounded me. So fast forward all the way to 2015, I immersed myself through self-study after living on a Buddhist retreat center in Hawaii, where I nannied in exchange for my living. And I wasn't Buddhist, I didn't practice it, but I sat there and I observed and I watched. I then began to study and attend silent retreats while participating as a true student of the practice. And then I studied under the program direction of UMASS, the first mindfulness training center in the US created by John Kabat Zinn in mindfulness education. So I paired my continued education with ongoing 4, 6, and 8-week mindfulness trainings from leaders that directly studied under John Kabat Zinn himself. And then I moved on to conducting my first full-day silent retreat. And that kind of catapulted me into moving into my first ever, like over the last 3 years, I've immersed myself into various trainings from UMASS professors and leading teachers from around the world in mindfulness. I most favorably enjoyed my 30, 60, and 2-hour-long trainings from the collective of 27 teachers, including the works of Dr. Hanson, John Kabat Zinn, Sharon Salzburg, Patricia Jennings, Siegel, and most recently, Meena Srinivasan. I'm also a certified adult and children's yoga teacher, mindfulness teacher, graduating from one of the top in the nation yoga schools, as well as fulfilling Yoga Alliance requirements. While spending the last 2 decades as a caregiver of children, I've now begun to couple my mindfulness training and then the many daily demands of being a caregiver for children. So I'm curating a curriculum for nannies to implement in the homes they work in, supporting families' emotional, social, and physical success, reaching the core pillars of any successful family and nanny dynamic, which I think we can all believe can be pretty challenging at times. So enhancing the nanny's ability to overcome caregiver burnout is at the forefront of why Nanny meets entrepreneur now. And that's me here now with you. So then again, thank you so much for your time. I've dedicated the last 3 years of studying, practicing, and immersing myself in an embodied practice of mindfulness. I am and will always be a student in mindfulness, constantly seeking to be a beginner again as I continue to study and grow through my role as an instructor and a teacher. So looking back, I see how established boundaries, patience, time, grace, and an embodied practice of physical exercise through yoga and mindfulness have changed not only my entire career, but also how I show up in the lives of the children I care for. So I'll be sharing some slides with you today, and then we'll go over those. I'm gonna do that up here. And there'll be some interaction today. So again, if you'd like to pass, no worries. Let me pull this up here so I can see you guys. You guys can see me, yeah?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. This over here. And then share. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I appreciate you moving. Behind the scenes, there's so many different screens that are happening right now. So I always appreciate that extra help. So if you weren't with us for the last 2 series that INA supported us in, which is phenomenal, the International Nanny Association is doing this. We hit our last 2 webinar series, we discussed mindfulness, what it is and what it is not, and how becoming a mindful nanny can help us thrive in our careers. You can check those out on our YouTube channel. Feel free to like it, share, pass around International Nanny Association's information because they are truly a blessing to all of us. So we also touched on how utilizing mindful tools can access the best versions of ourselves as caregivers and help us thrive as individuals, while at the same time, we learn the importance and the impact of embodying the mindful nanny role. Embodying mindfulness is key to becoming a successful and mindful role model for both the children and the families we care for. So I think we can all agree that it's very important that we're not only modeling to the children we care for, but also the families, right? So we're building that, we're also helping and assisting in that bridge of communication between the two. I talk about that a little bit and how important it is as this becomes a whole family dynamic. Practicing mindfulness puts us on the path to supporting children's social and emotional needs and modeling these behaviors to further connect. So when we look at, so you can see up here the different dates. You'll be able to find those on International Nanny Association's website and YouTube. You can also find that on my website too. I have a million other resources too, so if you're really interested in all of this, you can check it out there. So we talked about this in my last two series, and I want to give a quick explanation about mindful moments. So let's take a mindful transition moment before we begin. A mindful moment is exactly what it sounds like. It's a moment we give ourselves that allows us to ground into ourselves, to disconnect from thoughts and stress and focus our attention on something important. Before we dive in, I want to acknowledge that we all came from a different place before we got on this call. Perhaps we came from another meeting or running errands or doing some other important task outside of this webinar. To recognize this, I want to take a mindful moment to transition. So let's take a moment to ground in. If you're sitting or you're standing, let's simply take 1 minute, 60 seconds to transition our focus and our attention into this space of learning. There's some basic ways we can greet transition. To focus on something basic, like perhaps feeling the ground beneath our feet. And if it feels safe and comfortable, go ahead and rest your eyes for a moment. And think to yourself for 3 full breaths. I am breathing in and I am breathing out. I'm breathing in through my nose, expanding my belly, and I'm breathing out to allow the belly to settle back in towards the spine. And let's take just 1 more deep breath in, and then exhale to let all the air out in our bodies. Awesome. So we just finished a mindful transition, simple as that. So if we think about this for a moment, this could be a great tool in between activities or tasks for the children we care for. Mindful transitions are what we talk about later, being as one of the main ingredients in our efforts to carve out time in a child's life to explore what I call the self. So it also very much gives back to us as caregivers of children when we ourselves take these mindful transitions. So thank you for embodying that with me just now. I think we can all agree as nannies, we wear many hats and we go from one thing to the next, rushing into our next moments. We also model this behavior to the ones we care for. So how often do we take just a few breaths before we transition? In fact, when was the last time you took 10 minutes to sit in silence without your phone or without reaching for the next thing we feel we need to tend to? So according to Harvard Medical Publishing reports, spending even 10 minutes of downtime to yourself in the quiet can help reduce stress, rebalance the mind, and restore the energy. In my last 2 webinar series, I really talk about the science of the brain. I also share a lot of various facts from Harvard, UMASS, UC Berkeley, and beyond. So if you're really interested in getting into the science of this, I highly suggest that you do your research. You can also check out the resources on my website. So taking a little mindful reflection, this is really important. Whether you practice mindfulness or not, before we integrate mindfulness into the children's lives we care for, we must consider some very important ingredients. Let's take a moment to silently reflect in about 60 seconds or less about some of these questions. If you would like to, you are welcome to answer, and I'll prompt you when to do so. So I would just like to go around the room, and again, please feel free to pass. But what brought you here today to this webinar series? If you'd like to answer, feel free to. I'll wait for a few moments. If I don't hear anything, we'll just move on. Hi, Sandra, I just saw your camera turn on. Hello. So I want you to take a moment to look at your current inner landscape in life. In other words, how are you feeling? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being really feeling heavy or sad or really burdened, or level 10 of feeling full happiness and calm. Think about that for a moment. Just check in your body. Ask yourself, how am I doing? Whether it's your first time this week, today, this month, where you're asking yourself that question. And just take a few deep breaths into that space. If you could define mindfulness in 1 sentence, how would you define it? This is an important question. Yeah, Sandra, hi. So if you can't define it, we're going to go over that in a little bit. And I do define it for you in the first webinar series. Mindfulness has a unique ability to be drastically different, yet consistent in definition. So now I want to know, please be sure to always ask for consent with the families you work for on incorporating mindfulness into your daily practices with the children. I'll go over a list of ways that you can approach this in a question in this webinar, but remember, if you don't embody the mindfulness practice, you can't truly define it. You want to confidently ask for permission when it comes to implementing something new into the family's lives you care for. So otherwise, you're really going to do a family disservice. So has anyone asked parents of the children they care for to explore something new? And if you are willing to talk, go ahead and unmute yourself. But if you're not talking, please feel free to mute yourself so we don't distract anybody else. I just want to be mindful about our digital well-being. Has anyone ever had to ask their parents of the children they care for to explore something new? It's pretty challenging. Did you also hope that it would be implemented even when you were not there? I sure have, and it's really frustrating when I feel like I'm the only one enforcing the rules, the tasks, or the schedules, and later I give you some statements you can use that inspire parents to take a closer look into mindfulness themselves and get involved. And just by a raise of hands, has anyone in the room practiced mindfulness before? Awesome. If so, Aline, could you share what specifically and like how often? I know it's something that's hard to maintain.
It has become a daily practice, and it's the idea of being in the present and taking every moment to get back to that place, that innate place, that place of being. And I try to do it several times a day, and it has lessened my anxiety.
I'm so proud of you. I could even see that as you were talking. You just tune into that space. And I recognize that so much. So thank you so much for sharing that. I notice that when I choose to be mindful, I start to slow down. If you look at the beginning of my presentation, I'll always be very real. If you look at the very beginning of my presentation, I'm talking fast. When I choose to step into my own mindfulness practice, I start to slow down. So checking in with yourself before you show up to work, just like Aline was talking about, taking those moments to check in with yourself, or before you give an answer is important. I think our emails would show up a lot different if we chose to take 5 deep breaths in and 5 deep breaths out before we replied sometimes, right? I certainly does for me. So when you do it for yourself, and then especially for the children you care for, mindfulness hands you the tool to tap into the emotions of the children you support. If you're equipped with managing your own feelings, sensations, and body language, you'll better be able to gauge the children's. We then can know when we can apply mindfulness and where. In a sense, checking in with the children, observing and finding ways to make mindfulness fun. And remember that every day you will respond differently to mindfulness. The key ingredient is to show up in kindness for yourself first and foremost. So while embodying the practice is vitally important, checking in with your current daily landscape first and practicing mindfulness with yourself is foundationally key before you ever seek to teach it. I couldn't be more clear on that. It's very important, similar to potty training, right? We don't want to come out the gate and just teach something that we can't be inconsistent with. We also don't want it to create a task either. I'll go over that a little bit later. Let's look at our next slide. So let's look at some mindful practices you'll want to be observant of and participate in before implementing mindfulness into a family's lives. So remember, we don't want to be mindless about this approach. So when we look at this slide, we think mindful practices. You're taking a mental note of the family you work for's habits and current routines. You're checking in with the current landscape of the family as a whole, and you're considering their routine and current life schedule. So you're also practicing at least once a day for 30 days using a mindfulness activity. There are a million resources out there to use, but if you want a list of resources, you can sign up for my monthly newsletter on my website, themindfulcarecollective.com. And also last, you also want to, your mind streaming once a day. So practicing a daily journal habit or mind streaming activities, and I actually literally synchronistically, I didn't even plan this. I have a Nanny and Me Mindful Nanny mind streaming exercise you can download. I just posted it on my Instagram pages, the Mindful Nanny Collective and the Mindful Care Collective. And then just a healthy reminder, if you are not on mute, could you please do me a great favor? For some reason, whenever that happens, the screen starts to go in and out. Okay, so let's look at embodying equals modeling. I talk about this and really dive into the ingredients, the integration, the ingredients, the embodiment, and the community accountability in the last webinar series. But when we look at this, we wear many different hats as nannies. So becoming a mindful nanny is yet another hat, and one that should be considered another class of nanny in the new modern age. It takes a lot of work, but it is certainly worth it. So in a sense, as a nanny, you're always on, right? But you have another layer to always being on while integrating, embodying, and modeling the behavior of mindfulness. So embodiment, when we really think about that concept, once you've gone through your own mindfulness training, then you'll be more likely to understand where the children are on their mindfulness development journey. So equipping yourself with the tools to support them and the questions that they're going to have along the way. And there are going to be a lot of questions. And if you don't embody something, you can't quite understand, and because you haven't gone through the experience of it, when a child is showing up in frustration. And again, we want to set them up for success. I love this quote. The mind is just like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets and the more it can expand. I read that again. The mind is just like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets and the more it can expand. Isn't that so beautiful? And it's empowering. So I'm going to turn off my screen sharing. We're going to get into some of this. I want to share this very important piece of bringing mindfulness in, okay? And then I'll give you some good examples, but I'm going to take off the screen here. We're going to stop sharing so that you could just see me. So can everyone see my face? Awesome. Wonderful. That's so nice to see all you guys' faces. I love it. Thank you. Aline, I love your smile. Okay, so this is really important. So before implementing the mindful nanny role, we want to ask ourselves, am I reaching my current job goals and objectives? If not, be sure to give yourself a timeline and nail those down before introducing something new into a family's lives. Are they going on vacation soon? Are you going on vacation soon? Did they recently have a family death or a big job loss? You want to be sure, and well, in a sense, you want to be mindful of the family's current landscape before diving into something and introducing something new. And of course, always, I can't say this enough, ask for consent first. Introducing and broaching the question of bringing mindfulness into a family's homes and the lives you work in is foundational to a successful, embodied, mindful family experience. I know as nannies, often 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, they have certain rules A. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, certain rules B, right, with the parents. What we want to do is encourage this consistency, that whole family approach. So a big question I get pretty often is, how do I ask for consent in this area? What does that look like? And I have 3 examples of asking for consent, and they can sound like this, and I'll go over those. In my trainings, I spend a good amount of time with you outlining how to approach this in an organic way for you. So we do this after we've embodied the weekly guided yoga and mindfulness sessions that we do together. That's required in my training, which is great self-care. But as far as the consent, it might look like this. Here's 3 options. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Jackson. I've been seeking out additional resources to support your children in their next stages of development. I just recently learned that mindfulness could support your child's social and emotional needs. I believe it's important to help them maintain growth, appropriate activities to support them as they transition into school. Would you be open to me teaching them how to be kind to others and build their social and emotional support? Okay, so that's 1 example. 2 example. I really enjoy teaching life skills to your children. Would you mind if I included mindfulness practices into our daily routines? I noticed in myself that simple tasks such as taking a mindful stretch and a breath before I begin my morning routine has greatly improved the way I show up to my first task of the day. I can see the benefits of getting in the right mindset before I explore my next task. Do you think your family would benefit from this? Okay. 3rd and final one. I'm always seeking new information supporting your children in thriving. I found great science-backed evidence and watched International Nanny Association's webinar series on how to become a mindful nanny, and found that mindfulness can help regulate emotions, help children persevere through changes, and support their brain development. There's some good trainings and nanny book clubs out there that would support me in my continued education as a nanny. Would you be open to me sending you an email with resources that we can discuss later this week? So, right, you're just bridging that gap until you can talk about it again. It's an involved conversation, right? So now that we've gone over ways to ask for consent, let's explore mindful family integration, which I love. So I'm going to share my screen, okay? Boom, boom, boom. I always make up songs in my head as I go to the next one. Okay, so mindful family integration. We talked about this earlier, understanding the current family landscape before implementing mindfulness is vital to your success. So you want to give yourself time to observe the family's natural daily routine. During this time, reflect on the following. Do they know what mindfulness is? Have you ever heard them bring it up? Do you believe they would benefit from mindfulness? Would they make it a nanny role to implement or a whole family approach to learning mindfulness? That's a good question. Which mindfulness exercises do you believe the children would most engage in? So like I said earlier, and I'll say it time and time again, you'll hear me like a broken record, and we all know this to be true as nannies, which is so lovely we share this concept. Consistency is key. So it's imperative we observe and evaluate the family's current season and schedule before we invite the practice in. Like I said earlier, much like potty training, we don't want this to be an inconsistent offering or a task. We also ideally want this to be a whole family approach where all parties of the family are encouraged to continue the daily practice and feel inspired to do so. And hopefully you can become the mindful family facilitator. That's the whole point of my trainings, is that you can hold the space, because if we can't even find the space to sit down for 10 minutes, imagine how a family would feel. And for those of you that have your own families, you know this to be true. So that's why if I'm here to support you and feed into your own self-care while I hold the space for you, then you start to see the benefits and you start to embody them, and you can't help but talk about it and express it, right? When we get excited about something, when we believe in something, we can't help but share that good news. Same thing, we want our families to really embody this. So I do, by the way, I have my first training coming out in August, so feel free to message me on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. I love connecting with each and every one of you, and I am looking for some beta testers of my program. I want to make sure that this is really catered to you and what you guys need. I know I'm not the only nanny in the world that has different concepts, information, and background, so I'd love all the feedback I can get. So all in all, we all want to become our own best teachers of mindfulness, and then we want to be able to approach the families that don't know about mindfulness, and bring about a plan that allows families to become their own best teachers of the practice, finding ways they can utilize the mindfulness practices into their everyday lives, and more importantly, in a way that works best for them as a family. That's really key. So if you Google what mindfulness is, there's 1,000 different definitions out there. But within those definitions, there's a lot of consistency there. But you want a family to be able to find that themselves, right? So as I said earlier, I'll be giving some mindful examples of how to broach the topic with families. But here's a small yet simple example that I came across just a few months ago. So, mom boss. Oh, I'm so frazzled. I feel like I can't get everyone out the door on time. Me. I completely understand that feeling. When I first started in my career as a nanny, I did the same thing. Would you like some support in this area? So insert beginner mindset. We talked about that last week, what beginner mindset was. So take a few seconds, maybe take a few deep breaths, and put yourself in a beginner mindset role, right? You've been doing this for years as a nanny, and maybe mom boss, this is her third, she's got her second child and he's 3, and this is their, right, the collective first 5 years of their life between the 2 children. It's a big task. It's a lot of new concepts, that beginner mindset. So mom boss, yes, please, I don't understand. Me, great. I always want to ask you if you'd like me to give advice before I do. Super key. I know a way that we can set them up for success if we approach our mornings differently. If you're open to this option, I'd be willing to stay a few minutes after work one day this week to discuss how I can support you in implementing this mindful routine. Mom boss, sure, well, maybe next week. Me, great. I love working with you as a team, and I'm excited to share what I believe will be helpful tools to support your family. In the meantime, I can also start implementing these myself with your kiddos if you'd like, or would you prefer for me to wait until we discuss what mindfulness is and what it is not? Does that make sense to everybody? Gives you a concept, right? But also, we're always asking permission before we give advice. Another mindful nanny role. This also empowers the family to make a whole family approach and decision. And it clues them in on the importance of keeping this consistent, similar to potty training, right? So I know that was a lot of information. So feel free to grab a water break or give yourself a good stretch. And I want to ask and take a moment here. Does anybody have any questions? I know I spoke a lot. I myself am going to grab a glass of water. Awesome, that's great. So we can just move on. So let's look at technology. Technology is a great tool that allows us to connect to the world outside of ourselves. Yet we're seemingly perpetually connected to it, right? Our phones are a great example. We panic when we can't find our phones, and we utilize them in our roles as nannies and caregivers, as well as our own personal lives. And I think we can all agree that our technology use can be mindful and mindless at times. So let's look at this slide. Mindfulness can evolve and thrive in any cycle of life. Being mindful about technology is a learned life skill. So learning technological mindfulness can be very useful. Remember, once you practice this yourself, then you can teach this skill. So engaging in the technological mindfulness is a great embodiment practice that keeps me personally tuned in. I always have this thing with me, right? I'm sure you guys all have it next to you on your bed. If you're not, you're talking about it on your phone. So asking the questions, why are we reaching for a movie or a show or our phones? We often are quick to log into our technology before we log in with ourselves or our surroundings. So are the parents always on their phones? Are you? Are the teenagers in the home? Checking in with the feelings of why we're reaching for anything outside of the present moment is important to reflect on. Perhaps it's being bored. So what does being bored mean on a deeper level? Perhaps your body simply needs more stimulation or body movement or total and complete rest and relaxation. So looking at this next slide, and something we all know to be true, role modeling matters. So when we look at the 4 questions we unconsciously ask, and I love this is a quote by Maya Angelou, 4 questions we unconsciously ask each other at all times. 1, do you see me? 2, do you care that I'm here? 3, am I enough for you, or do you need for me to be better in some way? 4, can I tell that I'm special to you by the way that you look at me? So I recently was connected with or participated in the 2020 Confident Kids Summit, and Julia Cook talked about this, and I paused and I got a little bit teary-eyed because it said 74% of children feel undervalued by their primary caregivers due to seeing them connect more with their phone than with them. That's a big number. So 29% of students say school is a caring and encouraging environment. So when we look at those 2 numbers, we can see how much the primary caregivers or whoever's in the home, if that's us working 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, being in tune and looking at our children and making sure that they feel seen is a really important role. And I think that somebody has their mic on. So if your mic is on, go ahead and feel free to turn that off, or maybe the presenters could mute you. So when we role model, we also build trust. Trust is a huge factor when implementing any tool into the families' homes we work in. So it's important to recognize that you yourself must embody something before you can speak to it. People can sense and trust your confidence in teaching a new skill set. So if you yourself are embodying what you preach, believe me, once you embody mindfulness, you can't help but speak about its benefits. So trusting in yourself to complete the task is an ingredient of the process. We want to be sure we're hitting the foundational pieces of our job requirements before we add something new. And we also want to be sure that we know enough about the subject before we introduce the concept. I just posted about it on my Instagram not too long ago. I love listening to podcasts. In particular, I basically only listen to social, emotional, and psychological podcast presenters, but I love Brene Brown, and I love this book. Trust is earned in the smallest of moments. It is earned not through heroic deeds or even highly visible actions, but through paying attention, listening, and gestures of genuine care and connection. I think we can all agree that we also feel the same way. Another really important concept is leaders say they're sorry. So let's look at this. So if we look at our earlier example of using technology, we recognize we all fall short. We're required at some stage to be technological in our technological world while also remaining present. So remaining socially aware of the others that are currently present with us. And when we mess up and we realize that we have not been mindful of ourselves, our thoughts, our words, or of those around us and how they might be perceiving this present moment. So for example, I had an old nanny boss that loved to text me every time I went to go to my kiddo's martial arts class. And we would be there, but this was a participatory class. So I would be with my nanny kiddo and we would be engaging together. But they loved to ask me when I could book their next flights or what the grocery list looked like and if I was on tune. And I realized that being on my phone, talking to the mom boss, while the kiddo I was caring for had repeated my name 3 times. It's important when you recognize that you've fallen short to be gentle with yourself and then recognize that you need to say, I'm sorry. I kind of beat myself up because I know better. You allow a child and you tune in and you listen to them right away on the first, she calls me auntie. Auntie, and when I look, I engage with her, even if that's saying, oh, I just need a mindful moment to finish my current task, but I'll be with you in just a moment. But I kind of beat myself up that day because she said my name 3 times. And so I recognize through mindfulness, I'm always going to fall a little bit short, but to be gentle with myself. So typically when I guide in these mindfulness exercises, when our thoughts go outside of the practice, I say, could you just gently escort yourself back to the physical feeling of your breath? And I love that sentence, just gently escort yourself back. So mindfulness, our ability to love ourselves and other people really does matter. Mindfulness grows grace, humanity, and empathy within the self. And mindfulness reminds us as nannies that we once embodied a beginner mindset. We all used to be a beginner child caregiver, just like these parents. So modeling apologies still holds space for accountable and responsible learning opportunities. Apologies are vital to the growth in the relationship. So make sure you keep yourself accountable to say, I'm sorry, I'm still learning myself, and I will try harder next time to show up in this circumstance with a more mindful behavior. This alone greatly embodies the mindful nanny role. So once you've embodied the mindful nanny role, you may begin to take some of these types of statements. And we'll look at this slide here. So keeping the family engaged, now that you've got them there, now that you've embodied it, and now that you've gotten the family there, and we're all on board as a team, so we can continue to keep the family engaged in these processes. And it looks like this. And maybe I'll actually just read each one because it seems like we have a quiet group today. So I'm eager to help your family thrive as a whole. Mindfulness is proving to be a great tool. I'm so happy you're open to embodying it with me. Statement 2, this morning we talked about tasting our food and where it came from. It was a neat mindfulness tool that seemed to set the tone for the rest of their morning. We had really a great time discussing nutrition in a fun and engaging way. I noticed when I incorporate fun mindfulness activities with the children I've cared for, their social and emotional needs are met. I find that mindfulness supports me in navigating critical life skills. I have noticed a foundational difference in my own communication skills. It's really important as nannies we share our stories when we can. Teaching mindful routines to support self-management, goal setting, and healthy decision-making skills has changed how I nanny. And the final 2. Teaching mindful communication supports our ability to gain healthy, regulated emotions while conversing and cohabitating with others. And last but not least, mindfulness supports the creation and self-motivation that supports a positive climate and community among siblings, parents, and self. So much of what we do includes organizing our time. So when I look at this, I'm looking at this slide and I'm thinking, gosh, how often do I actually get to sit and drink a cup of coffee, right? Or tea, I'm moving around. But when I'm mindful, I recognize that I also need to fill in my own well. I need to tend to myself. So be sure you prioritize your own self-care time so that you can keep the children's mindfulness activities engaging and fun. If we're reaching from the bottom of our barrel, we don't have much left to give, right? So Mindful Nanny weaves in mindful approaches that help you bond with the children you care for. A mindful nanny can find mindfulness activities around every corner. So it's really important. We want to keep our practices short, kid-friendly, and consistent. So speaking of fun activities that we can do, we're going to go over some of these. So mindful activities teach us many different things. And I speak to these many mindful activities in my trainings. My training includes information pertinent to the nanny role, but we also include children's yoga trainings as well as preschool mindfulness training. These trainings included and are not limited to supporting the nanny role, as well as the children's children that you care for. So we go over things like self-soothing, employing stillness, deep breathing, enhancing self-esteem, developing mindfulness, and practicing patience and communication. So taking my training packages that include becoming a certified mindful nanny, and then you also become a certified children's yoga teacher, and then also a certified preschool mindfulness instructor. And these will all certainly up the ante when it comes time to an interview in your next childcare role. So when we look at the activities, we can look at making mindful activities every day an option. So using toys to model mindful conversations or practice mindful breaths, using tools such as books to ask open-ended questions like, how do you think that made that character feel? So supporting feelings of empathy and feeling, and also I have some feeling charts that you can download on my website as well. Mind streaming journal activities or art checking in with the body, using art to check in with the body and sharing everyone's highs and lows of the day, just acknowledging those feelings, normalizing that conversation. I love this. This has by far been the best approach that I've used over the last few years when I've been doing mindfulness with kiddos. So mirroring the conversation back to them. I heard you say blank. I could imagine that that made you feel blank. And it gets their brain into a space where it's problem solving themselves because now they feel heard, they feel tended to, and all their emotions in a sense can kind of lie down and say, oh, we've been heard, we've been seen. And then problem solving brain comes in and says, oh, I could solve this by this. And then maybe later on after those deeper conversations or just normalizing these conversations in general, we will tie in a practice where we go on a mindful walk, observing the blades of grass, noticing the weather, talking about the colors you see and observe and the smells, using those 5 senses to help this child ground into their surroundings. Our mind can be a dangerous neighborhood if we allow it to, right? So we want to make sure that we remember and recognize all the beautiful things that are around us in life that are just a short walk outside of our front door or within our home. Picking a flower, practicing mindful breathing, smelling deeply in, and then exhaling out. Simple, fun ways to engage those spaces of the brain and the body and the mind. And that breath work, and we talk about this in my trainings, helps alleviate that nervous system, sets it back in motion, and empowers the child to find their own sense of well-being and regulation. Some other mindfulness activities that I go into great depth with, and I also am creating, it's been really, really fun, I'm creating printables that you can utilize and use for yourself so that you can kind of just hit the ground running, are mindful eating, body scans or hand scans, mindful walking, mindful transitions, mindful breathing, mindful listening, mindfulness for better sleep, observing the ordinary. I love that. How often do we just look at our hands? This is our ordinary hand, or our toes. And then also mindful physical activity, moving around that energy in the body and releasing what no longer serves us, right? And yoga is a really great, gentle, fun, and effective way to do that. I use a particular platform that I incorporate in my trainings, and we use 10-week curriculums to focus on, focus, concentration, kindness, and beyond. And we use these adventures in little ways where we're trying imagination yoga in the jungle or the ocean. It's all very, very fun. So we're wrapping up. We only have 2 more slides to go. This is the one of the second one, and then we'll open up some questions. And if you've made it this far, I say thank you so much. And I'll have a special little coupon code just for you that provides you 50% off of your own self-care. I also this week I'm going to have some other offerings, but I'll get to that in just a second. So normalizing our feelings is really important to have these kind of conversations when they begin to evolve in their own mindfulness practice. We talked about this earlier. So once we have embodied the own practice ourselves, we can then answer these questions that come up and we can help problem solve them a little bit easier. Remember, our whole job is to be a teacher to these children, right? We want to create a space where they create their own answers for themselves because there is no one same person that's alike in this world, right? We're all uniquely made and beautifully made. So a restorative approach to misunderstandings, which will often happen whether you're practicing mindfulness or not, and what to ask your children when something goes wrong. It could be questions like, what do you think you need right now to make things right? Who's affected by what you did? In what way have they been affected? What happened? What were you thinking at the time? And it's not, what were you thinking at the time? It is, what were you thinking at the time? What were the thought processes you were going through? What have your thoughts been since? I love Viktor Frankl's quotes in general, but I have his quote at the bottom here. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. And in our response lies our own growth and freedom. Circling right back to the fact that we want this experience to be your own growth and freedom for yourself and also for the children and the families we care for. So kids are asking for mindfulness in schools, and I love this. These are some of the quotes that I picked up from the various trainings, documentaries, and my own experiences with kids. And I love this one. This is from a fourth grade boy. It's actually from mindfulschools.com. They have an amazing documentary series. I really encourage you to check it out. Nothing will inspire you more to really get onto your own mindfulness journey. So you go all day without feeling what you feel. You just wake up, you do your morning routine, go to school, come back home, and you don't stop. But with mindfulness, you do stop. Actually, I see a little typo there. I should say, but with mindfulness, you do stop. And when he said that sentence, I paused, I erased, I listened to it again. Because that's a powerful sentence coming from a young mind. Another quote, I'm going to school okay, but what's the value if I'm not going to be able to relate to anyone? That's a powerful sentence. And look at that 29% that we read earlier too, right? At Marina Middle School in San Francisco, where they had the record's highest attention rates in the city, students agreed to take part in an 8-week mindfulness study. After the course, 80% of the 7th graders calmed down more easily when upset. 58% focused better in class. 40% used it to avoid arguments or fights. 34% said it raised their grades, and 86% said more kids should learn mindfulness. I love that. Our kids are telling us what they need. 86% said more kids should learn mindfulness, coming out of the mouths of children. That makes me so happy. Similar results were found in a survey of nearly 1,000 students who learned mindfulness at 8 other schools. So to conclude, I just want to say thank you so much. I know you sat through this last 45 minutes, really engaging and listening. I threw a lot of information out there. This is all of my webinars have been very, very condensed down in the best way possible I could do, while just getting to the point in a sense. But again, these embodied practices that I help facilitate, I should say, are really important. So whether or not you choose to do the Mindful Nanny training, with it also, the option is to additionally add on the training of children's yoga, which has been amazing, and also preschool training as well. And I've partnered with 2 other companies to provide amazing, amazing content. And they've worked with Dan Siegel, they've worked with Rick Hanson, they've worked with some of these greater teachers, and I've really vetted these programs for you. But in the meantime, it's our job to improve the lives of the children that we care for. So there's free mindfulness tools, free weekly downloads. On my website. You can sign up for the newsletter, or you can check out my Instagram. I'm typically posting some of them there, but there's a lot of content that I don't get out. I'm very mindful about my technology, so I'm not always posting every day. Connection with other nannies. So we do free virtual calls twice a month. I'm going to be ramping that up because it's becoming more and more popular, which we are doing one this Sunday. And typically we do it at 12 noon, but I'm going to be hosting my friend's virtual baby shower. So we're going to be doing it at 11. So from 11 to 12:30 this Sunday. If you're interested, give me a follow on Instagram, the Mindful Nanny Collective, and then also the Mindful Care Collective. And I'll send you out, just DM me, and I'll send you out our little link just to kind of keep us all safe. We also have a digital well-being rules list that we read at the beginning of every one of our meetings, just to keep us all in alignment and just to be mindful of all of our needs. Also, we'll have weekly nanny yoga and mindfulness virtual classes coming soon. I'm super excited. It's been highly requested. I think the biggest feedback that I've gotten is I don't have to go to a gym anymore, and now I can work from the comfort of my own home. And you don't have to have your screen on if you don't want to, if you don't want anybody else to see you working out. And there's going to be some affordable membership options available coming soon for that too. So I'm going to turn off my share screen. If you want to, go ahead and take a screenshot of that, and then I'll plop in the mindful, the little coupon code for you guys, and you guys can receive 50% off my already really reduced prices for Nanny's own self-care. But in the meantime, we are finishing right at 47, Aline, just like I talked about the last 2 sessions. So we want to make sure we respect our presenters' time. So we're going to want to end right on time. But if anybody has any questions, please feel free to talk about those here.
Alexa, I just have to make a comment. This was just so good. And I'm sure, that, our colleagues online must have really enjoyed it. I think one of the things that resonated with me, you said in order to speak about something, to qualify yourself to speak about something, you have to embody that. And I think as professional nannies, that is just such a powerful statement, because if I am going to speak of and practice kindness, then I have to embody kindness. And then the children learn from that. So I really love that session. And I can't tell you, I feel like, I'm at peace. I feel like, yeah, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much, Elise, for sharing that feedback. I very much appreciate you. That was really lovely. Thank you. And Lisa, I've noticed that you've joined every time, and I hope to be able to connect with you sometime. And thank you again for sharing that, Aline. That was so nice. And Lisa, I see your note there. It says, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the last 3 Thursdays, and I've learned so much. That's so great. Lovely. I've learned just as much, I want to say, from each and every one of you. Every time I get feedback, it inspires me to just do a little bit better and to dive in a little bit more. So thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you, Sherry. She said this was really great, awesome. And Sandra, awesome, thank you, it really helped, lovely. And this week, I think I'm going to be rolling out, I need my own a little bit, I need some accountability partners myself. Often as a caregiver, I'm noticing, especially being home more, I'm wanting to give and give and give. And so this next week, I'm going to be doing some my own, I'm going to pop on for virtual live mindfulness and yoga sessions early in the morning. If you want, you can DM me or message me and you can get that login information.
And is it possible? I know that some people connect better via email. Is it possible, Alexa, that you can leave our email, your
Yes,
email with us?
absolutely. Yes,
That would
and
be
that's
wonderful.
you can always do on my website. It goes under the contact us page. You can always reach there. But if not, the email is the mindfulcarecollective@gmail.com. I
Thank you
also
so
have
much.
one that's the mindful nanny collective@gmail.com. So I have a few different options there. You can reach me. Thank you for bringing that up, Lee. Appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think it's an opportune time. I know we have a really good group here, a quiet group, but it means that they're delving into all the
Yeah.
topics. I want to take a minute on behalf of the INA to thank you so much for being here today. We know that you had a lot of things that you could have done, but the fact that you're here is a testament that you believe in mindful nannying, and I want to say thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. It's so nice to see all of the participants in here.
Right.
And thank you. That means a lot to me. Honestly, you guys are my true passion. Nanning is my true passion. So it's so nice to connect with you. And welcome to, I'm so excited you're on the new board for INA. It's such a very exciting time for INA. That's amazing. Is that correct?
Yes, well, I did not introduce myself as one of the newly elected board members. So for all the participants, I am Aline Mathurin with my colleague Ruka. We are here trying to moderate
Hey
this.
guys.
It is an exciting time for us because I'm sure I can speak to Ruka. Our intention is to serve and to help better our community and to help connect our community and represent our community, and such a wonderful opportunity that the INA gave to us. We are humbled by it, but again, the underlining intention is to serve and serve with a lot of dignity.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you, Sandra. Yes.
Well, Sandra, Lilac, Ruka, Aline, Sherry, Renata, Cindy, Valerie, Cheryl, Jen, I just want to really recognize that you're here and just say thank you so much. Hi, Lisa. Hello. It's so nice to see your face. I've seen you on other presentations, so it's nice to see you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this time. And remember, there's the 50% off coupon. I keep almost saying it out loud, but I know this session is recorded. So remember to go take care of your own self-care. Utilize that. It'll be good for the next 3 months. And thank you, Cindy. It says, thank you for sharing such important expertise with us. Oh, awesome. Yes, absolutely.
And so thank you, everybody. We will connect the next time, and I'm excited to meet you on yet another webinar.
Yes. This is a wonderful thing that INA is doing. It's really great.
It's really
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you guys
Yes.
so much for everything you do.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
And
Be
Ruka,
safe,
thank you
everyone.
for being a co-host, Ruka. Thank you so much.
No
Yes,
problem. Just quiet because baby's just writing and drawing. So
Thank you, Ruka.
say thank you guys for being the best that you could be. I know that I'm no longer a nanny in the same capacity, but I love that you guys are out there and you're what makes this, honestly, what makes this world better. Without you guys, there is nothing else that can really represent childcare the way you guys do. So I really do appreciate you. Be
Thank
safe.
you. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, thank you, thank you. And I just want to say thank you, Renata. I see your message. I really appreciate you. Okay, bye guys.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.